Good evening and welcome to It's Your Voice. I'm Dr. Nuriddin. As always, we're indebted to the Divine Supreme Being for an opportunity to address you. Quite naturally, we're praying that you're going to stay with us for the next few minutes. I want to be talking to you this evening about your health and some of the maladies and factors that are leading to our health being in jeopardy today. As a result of us living in this world of contemporary effects that's really taking its toll on all of us, irrespective of where we may be on the globe. And quite naturally, we're living here in the United States at the border of Canada and Mexico, but basically the entire world is being faced with many of the things that I'm going to share with you tonight. And I really want to talk to you from the standpoint today or this evening from the standpoint of obesity, insulin resistance, and inflammation, and what the problems are related to those things. Many of you know I've been talking to you all for several weeks now along these, but I want to start here tonight with a passage from the Holy Quran, the 5th chapter of the Quran, the 4th verse. And it leads us to, and incidentally, this revelation here, this book, this holy book that is practiced and read by Muslims all over the globe, 1.7 billion Muslims all over the globe, annually and daily, was revealed 1,400 years ago. But there's a statement here. Again, this is, the chapter is called Ma'idah. It's referred to also as the table spread, translated as the table spread by some of the translators of the Quran. The 4th verse, part of the 4th verse, it says, Yasalunaka Mada Uhila Lakum. Pardon me. Yasalunaka Mada Uhila Lahum. Kul Uhila Lakumu At-Tayyibat. Sadaqallahu Ladim. And God the Mighty has spoke the truth. This says here, they ask thee what is lawful to them as food. Say, lawful unto you are all things good and pure. Are all things good and pure. Now, mind you, this revelation comes to man, 1,450 some years ago. But this is a statement that was there. And today, we're living in a different world today than we lived in yesterday or during that time. I mean, we've got herbicides and pesticides and industrial waste and preservatives and additives and colorings and dyes and all of these type of things that's really going into the food today that they didn't have then. And just the processing of the food, the way that we're processing food. You got GMOs today. You have so many different things today that were not there yesterday. So when we start talking about what's good and pure today, something altogether different to a great degree than what it was well over 1,400 years ago. So we have to take into consideration today, what are we faced with when we start talking about things that are pure? I mean, the food groups haven't changed. The proteins, the carbohydrates, the fats, the fibers, those things haven't changed. They're still the same. But how we handle the food chain today has changed tremendously. What we put into the food, how we process the food, how we cook the food, all of those things have changed, and they're leading to certain problems that the majority of the public are faced with. So when I say to you, what's lawful is that which is good and pure, then we have to consider what we're talking about. So let's move on. When diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. When diet is correct, medicine is of no need. This is an ancient Ayurvedic proverb. Let me repeat that for you. When diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. When diet is correct, medicine is of no need. We know, and we've heard this, many of you, maybe some of you, younger people maybe haven't heard of this, but most of us have heard this. Your food should be your medicine. Your food should be your medicine. And this is basically what's being said to you. When the diet is wrong, medicine is of no use to you. Why? Because the bigger problem that comes to us as it relates to our health is in the diet. It's in the food itself. It's not so much in the pharmaceuticals. It's not so much in the drugs. It is in those things. It is in alcohol. It is in those things. But the food itself is the bigger problem, more so than these other things, in the medication and the medicine. The medicine and the medication and the drugs and those things, they exacerbate the problem. But where the problem really starts at is in the diet itself, is in the food itself. So again, I repeat to you, when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. And many of you know this. Many of you have been taking medication, drugs, and pharmaceuticals for years. The problem still hasn't gone away. Why? Because the diet hasn't changed. If you would change the diet and you were really committed to building better health and you would change your diet, you wouldn't need no medication. You would have been off that medication a long time ago. If the diet was correct, the medicine would have been of no need. You would have been able to stop the medication a long time ago. So think about that, because it's really in the diet. It's not the medication. The medication is just contributing to the problem now because it keeps bringing more of the toxic material into the system that's gumming up the system, that's causing the inflammation in the system, that's ultimately leading to the obesity in the public today, and all of the insulin resistance that we're faced with today. So at the core of illness is the weapons of mass destruction. The high carbohydrate diet most of us have been eating our entire lives. That's the weapon. Let me say that again. At the core of illness is the weapons of mass destruction. The high carbohydrate diet most of us have been eating all of our lives. The more carbohydrates we consume, the worse the obesity, the worse the insulin resistance, and the more the inflammation becomes. Let me say that again. Carbohydrates, for the most part, are the biggest problem. What carbohydrates? Your cereal, your bread, your cakes, your donuts, your pie, your pizza, your pasta, your rolls, your rice, your potatoes, your sugar. This is where the real culprit is at. When we look at the food groups, I've shared this with you. Some of you may be here for the first time tonight, hearing this for the first time, or whenever you get a chance to hear this, because this can be broadcast at any time of the day. But we focus primarily on producing this program at night or in the evenings. And I've shared with you the food groups: your carbohydrates, your fats, your proteins, your fibers. And I've said to you primarily here, the American diet that we have here in the United States is a high carbohydrate diet, low fat diet. Should be the other way around. Should be a high fat diet, low carbohydrate diet. But we have been convinced down through time by way of the medical community that we should have a high carbohydrate diet and a low fat diet. And let's see what has happened as a result of us having a diet like that. the damage doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. As these conditions worsen, what conditions? Inflammation, insulin resistance, and obesity. As these conditions worsen, they feed upon one another. Obesity contributes to insulin resistance, which in turn worsens obesity. Inflammation aggravates obesity, promoting more inflammation. Insulin resistance causes more inflammation, which worsens insulin resistance. So all of this just feeding one thing, feeding on another. And we're dumbfounded today about why most of us are in the condition that we're in. Do you know how many people are obese? You can stand on any corner today in any metropolitan city and watch the people go past you and count the numbers of how many people are overweight. For that matter, obese. And in many cases, grossly obese, morbidly obese. I'm talking about your 500, 600-pound people. You don't see them too often in the street, but you see them now on sitcoms. You see them on TV, The Biggest Losers, TV programs now that are out there. Why? Because people have become so obese. And why? Because the body can expand to that degree when it gets out of balance. So this is a huge problem that we're faced with. I'm going to talk to you about these three things, these three weapons that I refer to as of mass destruction that are leading to these major problems that we have, leading to inflammation, leading to insulin resistance, and this vicious cycle is just a loop. It's a feedback loop in physiology. It upsets our internal balance in much the same way as gassing up a car with the wrong kind of fuel. That's really what happens. You're putting the wrong kind of fuel in your car, you know it's not going to run the way that it's supposed to. And it's the same thing. As we put the wrong foods into our body, then the body is not going to run correctly. Insulin resistance is going to become a problem. Obesity is going to become a problem. Inflammation is going to become a problem. Most all of you listening to me and watching me right now are suffering from one of these, if not all of these. This is a factor. Now the question is, what do you want to do about it? Do you want to do anything about it? Do you want to continue to suffer along these lines, or do you want to do something about it? See, it's one thing for me to give you some knowledge. It's another thing for you to change. It's one thing for me to give you knowledge. I can say, well, this is education. It's not education unless it's leading to change. Then it becomes education. Otherwise, I'm just giving you some knowledge. I mean, does that make sense? Things have to change. If things don't change for the better, then how was it education? You just accumulated some knowledge. So education means to cause people to do something other than what they've been doing that's going to make life better for them. Not just taking them and putting them in a classroom or giving them a class on a particular subject matter, and as a result of them being in that class, they say, well, I was educated, or because at the end of the class, they can take a test and regurgitate to you, give back to you the information that was given to them, but there's no change in behavior. Education is based on change of behavior. So I'm questioning you, I'm asking you tonight, do you want to get rid of the weight? Do you want to get control of your insulin? Do you want to get rid of the inflammation? Because if you do, then it's going to require for you to make some changes. And you have to be committed to the changes. You have to want to change. You have to desire to change. And what happens to us, where's the biggest problem? The biggest problem is in habits. The biggest problem is in the paradigms that we create, the habits that we create, the habits of eating, the habits of lack of exercise, the habits of not getting enough rest, the habits of overwork, not getting enough water, not getting enough nutrients, the habit of poor hygiene, the habit of poor sanitation. These are real factors. And unless those habits change, then the conditions can't change. The only way life can change for any of us as humans is we change our paradigm, meaning we change the body of habits that really drive our lives every day. If you're not willing to do that, then things are not going to change for you. And some of us just think, well, it's too much for me. It's too much for me. Mister, I'm 50 pounds overweight. I'm 100 pounds overweight. I mean, I've struggled with my weight. I've heard these, concerns that people have relevant to their weight. And I'm going to talk to you about obesity tonight. And it's just a real struggle. It's a real challenge for people. And for some of you, you've lost 30, 40 pounds 3 or 4 times and it comes right back. And you're still trying to figure out why can't I keep it off? Well, you can't keep it off because you don't change behavior. You change behavior for a little while, but you don't change the paradigm. You really have to change the habits. You can't hold on to the same habits. I mean, you can go 30 days, you can go 60 days, you can go 90 days. People are able to make it like that. But then, after that period, sometimes tragedy comes in, sometimes misfortune comes in, sometimes it's the loss of employment that comes in, the loss of a loved one that comes in. So many different things come in, and when those things come in, they cause us to have traumatic experiences emotionally. And when that happens to us, too often, we throw our hands up, we go back to drinking, we go back to overeating, we go back to eating the wrong things, we just give up on it. We throw our hands up in the air, and that's the end of it. Then the old habits start again. And when they start again, the weight starts to come back, the insulin resistance starts to come back, the inflammation starts to come back. And again, we're into that cycle again. We've fallen. So the key, quite naturally, is in changing behavior. And that's what I'm in the process of seeking to help you do. But I can't do it for you. I can tell you the way. I can tell you where your restrictions need to be as it relates to consumption. But I can't stop you from eating it. I can tell you what you need to eat, but I can't make you eat it. Those things are up to you. But this I do know, because you're immortal, you're a human, and you've been created by the architect of the universe. And you've got powers, you've got strengths that no other creature in the creation has. And I know, because of past experience and looking at my own life, as well as looking at the life of many others, with similar circumstances and conditions as yours, that if you want to change, you can change. The possibility for change is certainly there. This is the only factor for salvation. If you could not change, you couldn't have salvation. I don't care what religion you believe in. If you didn't have the ability, if God did not give you the ability the potential for change, then you could not save yourself. And you do have to save yourself and your family. As the scripture says, from the fire, in the fire, the fuel of the fire is men and stones. You have to save yourself from that. So you have the potential for that. The question is, do you have the will to do it? Do you really want to do it? Because you certainly can, but now do you have the will to do it? Do you want to do it? And if you want to do it, do you have the will to do it? But you certainly have the capacity to do it. You've got the potential to do it. So in case of our health, though, the results can be deadly. When I'm saying it's just like putting bad fuel in the car, but when you start talking about your health, when you're putting bad fuel in the body, the results can be deadly. Made even worse so because insulin resistance and inflammation are largely invisible. See, you being insulin resistant, you can't see that. If the inflammation, you can't see that. That's largely invisible. Obesity, you can see. These other factors that's leading to it, that's causing the complication, in many cases, you can't see that. But they slowly worsen. This insulin resistance and this inflammation, they slowly worsen, and we only become aware when the damage is done. That's how two of these weapons of mass destruction are taking their toll on the public today. The good news, actually, the great news, is that by reducing carbohydrate consumption, our diet will combat obesity. And I'm getting into obesity. Ultimately, I'm going to take you into insulin resistance and inflammation. We're not going to get a chance to do all that tonight. Today, we want to focus primarily on obesity. But again, I say it's threefold. The insulin resistance and the inflammation is there too. So what are these carbohydrates I'm talking to you about? Primarily, let's go back. Cereal, bread, cakes. These are basically made up of wheat. Do you know the majority of the wheat that we harvest today throughout the globe is a hybrid? It's not the original wheat that man was eating long ago. And do you know when it breaks down into the body, it produces more glucose than cane sugar? Yes. And the glucose, see, your cells have to have glucose. They don't make it without glucose. Your brain has to have glucose. Can't make it without glucose. Your mitochondria, those little furnaces in the cell that produce your energy, they burn glucose. So the cell has to have glucose in order for it to function properly, in order for it to be energized. But when it's too much, when the body is out of balance, and now you're consuming all of these carbohydrates, donuts and pies and pizza and pasta and rice and potatoes and sugar and all those kind of things, and the body can't process it, that's when the problem starts. And many of you, some of you who are diabetic, maybe some of you are borderline and don't even know that you're diabetics. Today, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So you've been warned. You've been cautioned about certain foods. And some of you check your insulin regularly to see where you are, to see if your insulin levels are balanced. what I mean by that, you want to make sure that your sugar is in balance. So you know what I'm talking about. So certain foods you're cautioned against, you're warned against. These are some of those foods. Now there's others beyond what I'm showing to you right here. Potato chips, and then we can get into the trans fats. Potato chips and corn chips and popcorn and those kind of things. Many of these foods have no value to your body. They taste good. We all like them. They manufacture them in a way for us to like them. They flour them in such a way for us to like them. What I mean, they decorate them in a way that's appealing to our eyes, but they taste good. Who doesn't like a good piece of pizza, a nice slice of pizza? All of us do. We all do. Who doesn't like a nice donut? We all do. Or a nice pie. All of us do. But these are the foods that's really causing the problems for us. And if you go back and examine your life, you particularly some of you younger people now, you don't have this problem yet. It's not really setting in on you yet. But you've gotten some signals and some signs. Sometimes you're trying to eat fruit, too much sugar. Doesn't agree with you. You have to let it go. Or there's other sweets that you're consuming that does not agree with you. And you have to let it go. You start feeling nauseated as a result of the consumption of it. Why? What's the problem? The blood is out of balance already. And now you're bringing in more of what has caused it to be out of balance, and it does not agree with you at all. And some of us have the disease. We're already diabetics. We're already hypoglycemic. We got these problems already. So I'm saying to you, those of you who are young, and some of you, look, sugar will cause inflammation. Sugar will cause pain. And some of you the pain comes on you, but you don't make the connection between what you had to eat. You don't make the connection between that pie and that ice cream. You're not making the connection between all of those sodas that you're drinking. You're not making the connection. So you continue on with the behavior until it just becomes unbearable, or ultimately you got to go to the doctor and then you get diagnosed with something. This is pretty much how it happens. I'm sharing something with you now that will help you build better health. Just by slowing, and you're not going to stop all of this all at once, but I submit to you that if you take yourself 12 to 16 weeks on cutting back, starting off with sugar, and then starting to cut back on the pasta and the pizza. You say, well, what am I going to eat? You're going to eat more fruits, more vegetables. And you have to cut back on the fruits too. You're all right with the berries, but certain fruits, papaya, too sugary for you. Watermelon, too sugary for you. You know, those high sugar fruits, apples, too sugary for you. So if you just start cutting back on those things, I'm saying take yourself 12 to 16 weeks. Like with me, what I'm sharing with you. More of your complex carbohydrates. More broccoli. More cauliflower. More lettuce. More tomatoes. Those type of carbohydrates. More of your beans, where you're getting more protein and more fat. More fat in the diet. more butter in the diet, more salt in the diet. Oh, you say, oh, Mr. Lynn told me I shouldn't be eating salt. Look, you shouldn't be eating sodium chloride. The stuff that you find on every table that they're just giving away, just sodium and chloride. Sodium chloride will give you hypertension. Look, sodium chloride or that type of salt, hypertension. No salt, hypertension. If you don't get salt, you're going to become hypertensive. What are the 4 main essentials that all of us have to have? You have to have oxygen, you got to have water, you have to have sodium, and you have to have potassium. Those are the 4 essentials for all of us. Let me say that again. Oxygen, water, sodium, and potassium. So anybody that tells you that you don't need salt is not giving you the right information. You do need salt, but you don't need sodium chloride. Where does this salt come from? Where is it harvested from? For the most part, it's from the sea. But that seawater has about 92 elements in it. When you get sodium chloride, you only got 2 of those 92 elements, sodium and chloride. The salt that you want has more of those 92 elements in it, like sea salt, or like your Celtic salt, or like your Himalayan salt. Those are the salts that you want to cook with. Those are the salts that you want to eat on a regular basis. And those salts still have magnesium in them, which is very, very important in terms for you to get H2O into the cell. Magnesium is a relaxer for your heart. So when people tell you that you don't need sodium, that's not true. But you don't need sodium chloride. And if you don't have the other salts, you need some of that salt. You got to get salt. You're going to get salt. Got to get salt from somewhere. Otherwise, the body is going to suffer. It has to have sodium. Okay, so let's continue on. But these are the foods again. I'm telling you now. Start cutting back. Start taking these out of the diet. I already know you're going to lose weight. I don't have to guess. I'm watching this happen with clients. I'm watching this happen with myself. And I've been watching it for years. So I know it works. It's not a question. And I know that you can do it if you want to do it. The question is, do you have the will to do it? That's what it really gets down to. Obesity. Do you know the only animals that suffer from obesity are humans and the pets that we feed? Let me say that again. Talking to you about being obese, overweight. The only animals that suffer from obesity are humans and the pets that we feed. Obesity hasn't always been the epidemic that it is now. In the 1960s, pay attention to this, just 14% of American adults were obese, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That number remained relatively stable until 1980, when the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Health released the first dietary guidelines for Americans, in which they recommend a diet low in fat and high in carbohydrate. 20 years later, that number had risen to 30%. Today, more than 40% of Americans who are adults are obese, and more than 300,000 die from obesity-related causes each year. Let me go back over this with you again. Because what happened? We got the wrong information somewhere. Well, how do we know? We're looking at facts. I'm not guessing in terms of what I'm sharing with you. We're looking at facts. I'm going to have to stop here shortly because I don't like carrying you all too long with these type of ideas because they start to become elusive. We're talking about obesity tonight. We're the only animals, humans, and the pets that we feed that become obese. No other creatures in creation. Obesity hasn't always been the epidemic it is now. I take you back to 1960. In 1960, just 14% of American adults were obese, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That number remained relatively stable until 1980, when the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Health released the first dietary guidelines for Americans, in which they recommended then, at that time, a diet low in fat and high in carbohydrates. Now, that's what most of us understand right now. We think that we're supposed to have a diet high in carbohydrates and low in fat because that's what was recommended. 20 years later, that number had risen to 30%. It had gone from 14% to 30% in 20 years. Today, more than 40% of American adults are obese, and more than 300,000 die from obesity-related causes each year. And I would dare to think that number is greater than that. The statistics are telling us that it's more than 40% of the people are obese. And just like I was telling you, you can stand on any corner in the metropolitan city and watch people walk past you, and what you're going to see is maybe 4 out of 5 are overweight. 4 out of 5 are overweight. That's how big the problem has become. Medically, we redefine obesity by body mass index. In fact, this number was popularized by none other than Ansel Keys. You can type his name in. Google his name, Ancelkeys. The person ultimately responsible for those misguided 1980 food recommendations. Body mass index is a measure of appropriate weight for a given height. If you're curious about this, again, Google it. Google body mass index and you'll find it out. If your number is under 25, you are healthy. You are at a healthy weight. Between 25 and 30, you're considered overweight. Above 30, you're considered obese. Over 40, you are morbidly obese. And look at what the world would want to tell you. The world would like to tell you that the reason you're overweight is because you're lazy and you don't work out and don't get enough exercise. That's what the world tells you. I believe the reason why you're overweight is because of your carbohydrate consumption. Not only do I believe that, it's accepted by many people, particularly in the field of naturopathy, in this field, where I practice. The problem starts in the kitchen. Excuse me. The problem starts in the kitchen. It's not a lack of participation in the gym. Let me say that again. I said the problem starts in the kitchen, not a lack of participation in the gym. Related to health, food is 80% of the problem. Lack of exercise is 20%. Now, I'm not going to get a chance to, well, maybe I'm going to do this and then I'm going to close. Give you some diseases that are caused or aggravated by obesity. Diseases caused or aggravated by obesity. Cardiovascular disease. What do I mean? Stroke, arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, contributes to heart attacks and strokes, hypertension or high blood pressure, phlebitis, venous blockage, elevated triglycerides in the blood, low HDL or low good cholesterol. I'm talking about these are diseases that are caused or aggravated by obesity. Other metabolic diseases and complications, cancers, esophagus, pancreas, kidney, colon, cervix, breast, uterus, prostate, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. That's all of these things working together. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're talking about diseases, causes, or exacerbated by obesity. Other diseases and conditions, cataracts, gout, pancreatitis, osteoarthritis, infertility, polycystic ovarian disease, sleep apnea, GERD. All of this. I'm going to stop here tonight. We'll resume when we come back. Next, we'll start looking at insulin resistance. And we'll also take into consideration inflammation. And I mentioned to you that these are the three weapons of mass destruction that's really contributing to the demise of most of the people in America. Let me leave you with this quote again. When diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. When diet is correct, medicine is of no need. It's been a pleasure talking to you as it always is. I pray that Almighty God will bless you. I look forward to talking to you all again the next time. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening.